Our guest on this episode of the Cancer Interviews podcast has gone through a roller coaster. He was diagnosed with chronic myeloma leukemia, survived, and then was diagnosed again. This is the story of Tim Sohn of Shahola, Pennsylvania, one that includes his expending plenty of time and energy to help others with their cancer journeys. And now we're going to hear that story. So Tim, welcome to Cancer Interviews.
Thank you so much for having me, Bruce. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you so much, and we're looking forward to hearing your story. Tim, it's our custom before we get into all the details of somebody's cancer journey that we learn a little more about this person, their life exclusive of cancer. So if you would, tell us a bit about where you're from, what you do for work, and what you like to do for fun.
Sure. So I am in Pennsylvania right now, in Northeast Pennsylvania, about an hour from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I like to say in the woods with the bears and the turkeys. And I'm originally from New York City. In terms of fun, I love to walk in nature. I love to take photos and videos in nature, spend time with my family. And in terms of my work, I do social media marketing work with businesses and nonprofits that want to make a positive impact in the world, and also live stream producing and hosting as well.
All right, now we want to talk about your cancer journey. For all of us who are survivors of cancer, there was this point in time in which we noticed something about our health, about our physicality that was not normal, that wasn't quite right. And unfortunately, that began a chain of events that led to a diagnosis. For you, what was that juncture like, and how did it manifest itself?
Yeah, so in 2006, I had a bruise or some bruises on one of my legs, bruises that I had never had bruises that looked like that before. So I went to the primary care physician. They did some blood work. And not that long after, I get a call saying, you need to go to the hospital right now. And so then what happened was I was in the hospital for only 4 days. They diagnosed me with chronic myeloid leukemia. And I was put on a treatment of using Gleevec, which is an oral chemotherapy medication. I've used that throughout for part of my journey, my earlier part of my journey. And then at some point I switched to one called Sprycel because sometimes the effectiveness of the medication wears off over time.
Now, there's not a question as to whether this diagnosis, when you found out of your diagnosis, it's not a question of whether it was a horrific day or not. Of course it was. But each person, when they get this awful news, they handle it in different ways, as each person is different. For you, once you were bombarded with this news, what went through your heart and mind?
I was in shock, which is kind of funny, but not really funny, because so many people in my extended family have had cancer, have passed from cancer. Some are survivors, some are, going through it right now. But my initial reaction was just shock. But I'm very grateful to have a family who was very supportive and continues to be very supportive throughout my journey. And my mom even worked in the hospital where I was diagnosed a little bit earlier in her career. So I was grateful to have the support from my family and also the great oncologist that I continue to see to this day.
By the way, we're confident you'll be able to learn some tips and tools to help you through your personal cancer journey. But first, we'd like to invite you to please give us a like, leave a comment or review below, and share this story with your friends. Kindly click on the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon so you'll be notified the next time we post an interview. And if you or a loved one are facing a cancer journey, please click on the link in the description and show notes below to check out our free guide, The Top 10 Things I Wish I Knew When I First Got Cancer. Now, Tim, to talk to you and to hear from you about when you first got cancer, different types of cancer place the patient in different positions. In other words, with some types of cancer, there are numerous treatment options. With others, it's very much cut and dried, and you can only go down one path. For you, you mentioned taking this oral chemotherapy. In terms of a treatment regimen, did you have options?
I did have options. There was Gleevec, and then I was given an option of a clinical trial. I opted against it only because nobody had ever taken it before. I would be the very first person, and Gleevec seemed to be working well. It was still very early on in terms of when Gleevec had come out. But I'm grateful that I went with that and now Sprycel, because it's worked. My journey has gone up and down in all sorts of ways, but now there are many different treatment options for chronic myeloid leukemia in terms of oral chemotherapy medication. So it's great to see the advances over the years.
Now, chemotherapy, regardless of the form in which it comes, is not easy. For you, in terms of the chemo, in terms of your overall treatment regimen, what was the toughest part?
I would say the mental part for me, because I've been very blessed in my journey in that I really haven't had physical effects from cancer or from side effects from the oral chemotherapy medication. So really the mental aspect. And then also when my cancer came back, at that point, that was very hard because I wasn't expecting the diagnosis, but I also and it had gone away at one point. But I wasn't expecting it to come back when it did. So definitely the mental part has been throughout the journey the most biggest challenge for me.
Now, referring to your first diagnosis, because we're going to get to the second one in just a bit, but in terms of the first diagnosis, when did you notice things taking a turn for the better?
I mean, all along, in terms of physically, I have felt fine. So this is kind of a surreal experience for me having cancer, but I don't know how you're supposed, I mean, everybody has their own journey when it comes to cancer, right? So I haven't felt any physical effects. So it's hard to describe that experience to you, really.
But when your doctors were saying that things were taking a turn for the better, how exciting was that?
It was really exciting. I was so excited. I was, contacting my family and friends. And then after that initial moment, I was like, so what does that mean? Like, how do I want to do anything different in my life? And, I found myself wanting to reevaluate all different kinds of things and make more impact in the cancer community. I had already started my show, Showing Up Perspectives on Cancer, when I found out my cancer went away, not that much longer after I created the show. So I was like, how else can I make a bigger impact in the cancer community? And that eventually has been through publishing a book and now doing 2 in-person events where we have conversations with cancer patients, survivors, and supporters about their stories. And we all show up to let everybody know that you're not alone and to encourage them to share their stories.
And we're going to hear more about your show in just a bit, but I want to bring up an unfortunate part of your journey, in that you attained survivorship, but that didn't end your journey. What happened next?
So I had found out that my cancer had gone away completely. And like I said, I was not expecting that at all. But when I found out, I was really excited. So I was in that space for a period of time where I had no cancer. And then when I went to the oncologist one day after he had done a test, it's called a gene test or a genetic test, where they test my percent of leukemia cells in my body. He had told me that, well, actually, he had asked me, did I tell you about the test results? This was from 3 months before that appointment. And I said, no, what test are you referring to? And he said, your cancer has come back in a very small amount, but it has come back. So it's just totally unexpected. And, I was I was not excited about that. My thought was like, what do I do now? And I think part of the conversation that needs to be had is like, as a cancer patient or survivor or whatever you are in the midst of your journey, like, what do you do for yourself to maintain your sanity? Because you don't know from 1 month to another, depending on your cancer, specific cancer, where you're going to be in the journey and what does that mean for you?
I would think, Tim, that mentally and emotionally, in addition to the physical piece, but mentally and emotionally, this would place you at a crossroads in which you didn't have experience to be your guide. And I would think that at this point, you or anybody in the position of someone who's been diagnosed a second time would either zig or zag. Either they would be just so emotionally and mentally defeated with the thought that I have gone through this, I've faced this mammoth challenge, I've put it behind me, and now here it is right in front of me again. Or you could say, well, this is awful that this has happened, but I've survived it once before, I'll survive it again. If you would describe how you address that crossroads.
Yeah, so for me, it was very difficult. I found that in terms of the closest people in my life, some of them did not understand what cancer coming back, like the impact that would have on me, because mentally it was really hard to do that, to just grapple with the idea that cancer is back. So yeah.
Now, you've mentioned that physically you haven't been, there hasn't been that much of a setback for you, but emotionally these days, is it still a roller coaster for you, or do you feel like you're driving down a smooth, well-paved road?
It's definitely a challenge for me, and I do some things to help with that. I see a therapist. I love taking walks in nature, like I was saying earlier, and taking nature photography. But it's still a challenge. You know, I did find out that my cancer has come down even more. It's still there, but it's down even more. So that's a good sign. And we'll find out in a few months where it's at.
Now, let's get to a positive, uplifting part of your journey, your story. And that is that while you are trying to manage your cancer journey, you are doing a lot to try to help others. If you would, tell us about that in terms of a literary sense and in terms of a podcasting sense.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bruce. So I started sharing my story in 2021. And since that, I have been invited to share my story many other times on virtual events or podcasts like here. So thanks for having me. And can you repeat the question again? I'm sorry.
Okay. I'll break it up into two questions.
Thank you.
First of all, just from a literary sense, you had mentioned earlier that you had written a book. It's been published about dealing with cancer. First off, not the podcast, but just the book. Tell us more about the book.
Thank you, Bruce. So the book is called Perspectives on Cancer. And the goal of the book is to let everybody know, cancer patients, survivors, and supporters know that they're not alone and to share their stories. And it includes my cancer story in the book, as well as the stories of 10 other patients, survivors, and supporters. And if anybody wants to find it, they could go to perspectivesoncancer.com to find the link for that. But it's been an incredible experience, writing a book for the first time and collaborating with other people to do that. A number of people in the book have never been written in a book before. And it's for the first time for several that they're sharing their stories or the stories of others in a book. So it's been cool to see the reaction to all the authors and hear about their experiences.
In addition to your having a book published, which is not necessarily an easy thing to do, in addition to that, on an ongoing basis, you reach out to others through your podcast. If you would, tell us about your podcast, and then once you've told us, let us know how we can tune in.
Absolutely. So the podcast or live stream show is called Showing Up Perspectives on Cancer. It is at 8:00 at night. And my co-host is Shannon Lee Sin. And the show is a place for us to all come together, share our stories. So we have a conversation with a guest every week, but then we also have an amazing global community of people who show up in the comments. You can watch on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, or Twitter. And if you want to find out more information, you could go to perspectivesoncancer.com.
Now, our interview right now is being recorded, but part of your vehicle, part of how you reach out to others is through live podcasting. If you would, for viewers, if you would just extol the virtues of live podcasting and the impact it can have.
Yeah, so live podcasting really gives you the opportunity to interact with your viewers. And when it comes to cancer, it's a really personal issue, but people, no matter what their perspective is on cancer, they oftentimes have questions or they're looking for support from others who have gone through something similar. So when it comes to live streaming, it really is great for building relationships with other people, whether it's in the comments or as the guest. And I also like live streaming for a show around cancer because cancer is messy as well. And in the hour of the show, oftentimes we have laughter, we have tears, we have smiles, we have all the emotions. Sometimes you have to break out the puffs, but hopefully not too often. Yeah, that's about the show.
And you mentioned when it's on at 8 o'clock, and it's 8 o'clock Eastern time. And
Yes.
If somebody wants to watch it, where do they go?
Perspectivesoncancer.com. The link is there for all things Perspectives on Cancer.
Okay. Tim, we're going to wrap up now. And while we begin our interviews from kind of the same place, we sort of end from the same place. And I'm going to put you in the position of someone who has encountered another individual who not only has been diagnosed with cancer, but they've been re-diagnosed. And you have a private audience with this person. You have a chance to get a message through to them. And there may be a lot of things you'd want to say, but if there's one thing you want to make sure that it resonates, one thing that would stick with that person, what would it be?
It would be accept the support from others. Oftentimes it's hard to accept the support wherever, depending where you are in your journey. But you'll find that you need support, whether it's from family or friends, or maybe you need a therapist or something like that to help you through your journey. So I would say accept support.
Our guest is Tim Sohn from Shahola, Pennsylvania. And in terms of his book, in terms of his podcast, one more time, that website, the place to go for all of the things that Tim has to offer is perspectivesoncancer.com. So that's going to wrap it up, Tim. Thanks very much for a wealth of information added concerning your present and your past, and sharing with us all the things that you can do for others in the future. So, Tim, once again, thanks for being with us on Cancer Interviews.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it.
And that's going to wrap up this episode. And as we do every time we wrap up, we want to remind you that if you or a loved one are on a cancer journey, you or they are not alone. There's plenty of people out there just like Tim who are in a position to help you and ease that cancer journey. So until next time, we'll see you on down the road.